Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit
Mhm.
from the parks. We're going to go now to the Disney Plus studio side of things.
Mhm.
Disney announced, I think it was last week. I don't know, all the days blend together now, but
Yeah, I know.
but I think it was last week where Disney Plus is going to be the priority for the foreseeable future. So they're going to start working and creating content for their Disney Plus service. Now, this doesn't mean necessarily that they're going to that they're not going to ever make a movie again in theaters. This is just
Mhm.
more from what I gather, and I could be wrong, but from what I gather, it's more or less just right now because of the uncertainty they're going to focus on Disney Plus. What are your thoughts on this move?
Well, we have to look at all the things that are interconnected with this, right? All the things that are intertwined. So, um, Disney Plus, as originally envisioned, was the future, right? It was the future for the Disney company, but it was very long term. It was very much long range. It was like, okay, well, this will be a big aspect of our company going forward, but for right now, we're going to stick with the tried and true and all that. Once COVID happened, that changed the game. But one of the things that was the kind of like overarching principle with how Disney Plus was implemented at first was how it was priced was very much not priced for profitability. It was priced for market capture. So they understood that with all the streaming services that are available, nobody's going to want the 20 streaming services. This doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah.
You're really going to have a few players in the game as we move forward here, and all the other ones are just going to be consolidated. So Disney wanted to be one of the main players at the end, and so what they did was they priced Disney Plus to really capture that market initially, and then raise the prices as time goes on. But that's another story.
Right.
So that got completely skewed with COVID. I mean, that when everything closed out, Disney Plus took on just a re-envisioned significance for the Disney company at large, and that's why you had this streaming, you had their what is it? What do they call it? The what is it? People subscribers went up through the roof. It just turned into a different vehicle altogether for them, and really the only one that's really being at all profitable. So now it's okay. How do we didn't initially price it to be profitable, but how do we maximize profit as much as possible? And that's where the Mulan thing came in. It's like, okay, well, can this be? Can we put out content that we usually have for the theaters on here? How profitable will it be? I think they were looking at Trolls and went, okay, well, maybe it's going to be maybe it can work. Turns out that maybe not so much for Mulan. But hey, look, here's the thing with it: whatever money it made, they pretty much absorbed all of it. They didn't have to split it with the theater owners. They didn't have to, as it gets percolate back to them, get whatever residual, dividends there are or whatever. It was just complete profit. So obviously, can we make this work? If we remember, when Bob Chapek was placed in the role of Disney Parks and Resorts initially, one of his first moves, because he came from consumer products, was to re-envision Disney Parks and merge it with consumer products and make it kind of its own division, right? So we had from Disney Parks and Resorts, we had now Disney Parks Experiences and Products. That's the division as it has become known, and that was because of that merging. We're seeing that again, but with the Disney Plus division or side of things.
Yeah.
So instead of having separate divisions for the various studios for like TV, it now becomes far more consolidated and far more streamlined. I think that we actually touched on this, that things like this were going to happen back in April when we first did our analysis. And now we're seeing that play out, and with a Bob Chapek touch. So one of the scenarios is like, okay, well, if they have a special featurette on TV, that usually would be limited to TV. Now, maybe could we have a simultaneous broadcast of those items, both on Disney Plus and TV together? That's one of the things that you're going to start seeing. Can we have multiple distribution platforms? if you see something on TV, can you then see it immediately on Disney Plus? Those are the kind of things that we're going to see. And of course, maybe we're going to get maybe a new crossover with the premium experiences, like the Disney live action studio releases and Disney Plus.
Yeah, and one thing, I have a lot to say on this subject, but I think
go ahead.
one thing that I think I've seen a lot of dialogue on social media about, Mulan underperformed, right? So that's sort of a referendum, so to speak, on the premium access model, like charging an extra on top of the subscription, right? And I really kind of have to push back on that a little bit, at least right now.
I would too.
Yeah, because I think Mulan, I don't know. See, I feel like the lack of sales they did for the Mulan Premier Access was more of a Mulan problem than it was a Premier Access problem. Like if you would have put Black Widow Premier Access on Disney Plus, it would destroy. Destroy. I think Mulan was a troubled situation from the get-go. I think even if you put Mulan in theaters, it was real iffy because of the political issues with the actress and her viewpoints. A lot of people were turned off by that. And there was a lot of stuff going on with Mulan. I think
there was.
Yeah, if you would have had more of a safer bet, like a Black Widow or something like that, you would have seen it sky high. So I think Disney shouldn't give up yet on Premier Access. I think 2 or 3 more films kind of get a feel for it. I just feel like this one example might not 100% tell the story about Premier Access. It might be more indicative of what people were feeling about Mulan. And then in terms of the long term, I think that this was always kind of like the goal. I think like you touched upon it. Like they really wanted to do more of a direct to consumer, relationship. And I think that this COVID situation really pushed that forward. It expedited it. And I don't think I still don't think the theater experience is going away completely, but it will definitely be a smaller piece of the overall pie that studios use for profit, in terms of these films. I think before the theater experience was the gorilla in the room, right? The elephant in the room. That's where the studios made a bulk of their money. I think that's going to really, really shrink. It won't go away completely, like I said, but it will be a smaller portion of that pie. They're going to do more direct-to-consumer stuff, more streaming, video on demand. And they really want to kind of break away a little bit from that theater relationship, because you also mentioned they have to share some of those profits with those theater chains. Well, and I think they just kind of want to, they don't want to completely cut that relationship off, but they definitely want to cushion themselves, because if something like this happens again in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, they don't want to have another scenario where they're like bleeding out because people can't go to the theaters. You know what I'm saying?
No, absolutely. This is the great accelerator. So we talked about it before in previous discussions. Whatever the plan was in 50 years, 100 years, that has been expedited to a degree incalculable. So and I think you're right. You're going to see a kind of a re-envisioning of the market, a market correction, so to speak, where it's not going to be front loaded to the extent that it was for distribution in movies and theaters. And I think, if you're a theater exhibitor, you should be very concerned about that for sure. But that's kind of how it was going before, and it's really going now, and that's kind of a reality of the market. And that's why the AMC capitulated and adjusted their windowing practices with Universal to get, to restore that relationship. By the way, the whole AMC thing, people thinking that Disney's going to, no, that's not going to happen. That's just, no. It's just that.
You mean Disney buying AMC?
Yeah. You've heard that before. It's not going to happen. It's, guys, they're very much in debt. They're not going to take on another failing entity. If they can make it work. So it's you're going to see that shift a little bit. I very much firmly believe that. In terms of Mulan, like you said, that has its own problems.
Yeah.
Even before all this, I even before all this, I said, "Hey, do you want to see Mulan?" And they said no, because it's not going to have Mushu. It's not going to have a couple of other notable things. It's like, okay, well, that makes sense.
Oh,
I think Soul. Oh, God.
I don't want to interrupt you. I mean, I'm sorry, but I just wanted to ask you, because last time we had a collabo, you haven't seen it yet. Did you end up seeing Mulan?
No, I still didn't see it. I'm sorry.
I'm just curious.
I have failed. I'm sorry. I failed in seeing it. No, I haven't. It's just I've been so busy. I really do apologize, sir.
No worries. I was just curious if you. I just wanted to get your thoughts on it if you happen to see it yet. But
see, this is why they're going to try other things out. They say this is how it goes. But Soul's coming, right? I think Soul. They just announced that it's going to be released on Disney Plus. I believe included. That's going to be an interesting thing.
Yeah.
So I think what you're going to see is I think the premium model is not dead yet.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely like, okay, maybe you have to adjust the price of how much you're charging premium. Maybe it really is genre based, like you said, like a Black Widow is a whole different thing than Mulan, and so maybe you have to be far more choosy with your films. Maybe you have to adjust the price per film. We've talked about that, I think, a little bit on here. I think we have, where it's instead of with theaters having just a one size fits all price for all of their movies, maybe you adjust the price based on how much budget that movie was thrown, that kind of thing. And I think you're going to see the price be adjusted a little bit for the monthly subscription price of Disney Plus, adjusted a bit to factor in premium content like Soul, a Black Widow, and so forth.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that might be the way to go, and just kind of adjust that premium access model and sort of play with it a little bit. I think it's just far too early to declare it dead after one get go.
It's not done yet. It's not done yet. Trust me, and especially it's like, okay, they just released Tenet. That did not do very well at all. So trust me, the premium distribution model, that's not done yet. And part of this corporate restructuring that you're seeing regarding Disney Plus and their streaming services is going to be part of that, I think.
Now, I have an interesting question to ask you, because I'm a big fan of John Campea. I watch Campea all the time, and he had his friend on Barnett, Robert Barnett, and they were talking about the Disney Plus priority stuff. And it was very interesting. They brought up an interesting point. And they said that this model of focusing on streaming kind of threatens the creative quality, right? Because in their whole kind of justification was where when you release a movie into theaters, the return on that movie is solely based on the movie, right? So if you release, Avengers Endgame in the theater, the return is based on that film and that film alone.
Yeah.
Whereas if you were to drop, let's say, Endgame, just as an example, directly onto a streaming service, it's more about the overall streaming service, the package.
Yes.
Not so much about Endgame. That's more. Endgame becomes a piece of that overall Disney Plus package. So John Campea was saying, and his concern, I think it was valid. He was saying that that model sort of lends itself to Disney sort of doing it as cheap as they can.
Yeah. You're talking about maximizing profitability.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. That is a clear point. One I've actually thought of separately. I didn't even know that Collider actually did a segment on it. That's something that I've thought of myself a lot, because if you cannot get the same amount of profit, you have to do the things where you adjust to make up for that loss, and you have to price it accordingly, right? And then I think that's why we say that premium model's not dead yet. But the problem that is inherent is, okay, how do you stop people from viewing it multiple times? Again, if the theater-based model, you could charge per viewing,
right, and per person.
per person, right? And you can't really do that with Disney Plus.
Yeah.
So do you factor that in, not just in terms of the pricing structure for the overall product, but also the budget that that product receives? Also, you do different things based on where you're putting it. So Mandalorian is different than a Rogue One, for example, right? And you budget for an entire season, and you have a length for an entire season versus a 2-hour film. So yeah, that these become huge factors and implications when it comes to, like you said, content quality and what you can do with some of this stuff. And I think that's why theaters aren't going away, at Jump Street, but there is going to have to be a recalibration here. It's going to be interesting to see, because we have a certain expectation. And, in a post-Endgame world, like you say, we have an expectation for quality. Does that get, do we shake that up a bit? How do we factor all these things in? I think it's a very interesting conversation.
Yeah. And one last thing before we take off, but like in terms of